right, we are almost 5 after the hour, everyone. Welcome to the December National Pilot Webinar. As always, I will remind everybody to please mute yourself upon joining the call. However, this is an open discussion, so feel free if you have a question, you can unmute yourself and ask it, or you can enter it into the chat option as well. These presentations will be recorded and posted on our website and the MBS Sharon YouTube channel. So if you have a colleague that you think would be interested in them, you can always direct them to our website or the YouTube channel. So we are going to go back to our regularly scheduled agenda, where we're going to have some of the pilot sites discuss any updates. And then we'll go through some announcements at the end. But before we start, I just wanted to check in and see if do we have anybody new to this phone call that wants to unmute themselves and introduce themselves. It sounds like we're all here and been at this call for a while. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. I will see if there is someone on the call from the New York program that's going to give their update about what's going on. I know that I got some updates in email, but if you don't mind unmuting yourself and expanding, I'd appreciate it. Do we have anybody from the New York program here? Ooh, bless you, Stan.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was on mute.
That's okay.
All of us are running to diagnose your sneeze.
Well, maybe none of the New York folks can't make it on the call today, but they did send me an email update about what's going on in their state. They're looking to add MPS 2 onto their panel. They're projecting that it will be sometime next year. So we'll look forward to hearing more about that in the new year. GAMP, there's still no referrals. So that's that update. And they did find a couple of cases in Screen Plus, the Screen Plus pilot. They did find a couple of Fabry as well as one Gaucher case. So maybe we can hear about a little bit more about that next year as well. And a new pilot that is on their agenda is a pilot for CMV. So I can't answer any questions about that pilot study or those updates. So feel free to email Dr. Michelle Kajana or Joe about that, or maybe we can discuss it during our next meeting. So now I'm going to turn to the North Carolina team. I saw a few people on the call. I think Dr. Melissa Raspa is on the call from that team. Are you able to give the update, or is it Lisa?
Yeah, I'm here and Lisa's here too. So okay. I don't know which one of us wants to give a quick update, but I can start, Lisa, if you want to jump in. So yeah, we can start with DMD. So we've screened about 12,600 babies so far in our pilot. This is a consented pilot through Early Check. We've had about 84 cases screen positive, 53 males, 31 females. The vast majority, 70 of them, have consented to doing the next generation sequencing. Of those, 56 were normal or negative. We had 12 quote unquote positive, but really just two Duchenne muscular dystrophy identified. The rest were other variants, which I think is pretty much where we've been for a while, honestly. So that's that pilot. And that's the only one we're doing right now through Early Check. But we also have an MPS 2 pilot that's a waiver of informed consent pilot. So those numbers are a wee bit bigger. So right now we're at about 30, maybe 31,000 babies screened for MPS 2. That started in August of this year. So obviously volume wise, we've got a lot more that are coming through for MPS 2 than for DMD. We've had 5 screen positives so far. They've all been sent for second tier dried blood spot gags and sequencing. Those have all come back negative. Interestingly, I think all 5, and Lisa, jump in here if I've got this wrong. I think all 5 have had the same pseudodeficiency allele, which is really interesting considering that's 5 so far to date. And that's out of, thank you, Kristen Santu. So yeah, so that's kind of where we are right now. It's been, I don't know, a couple weeks since we've had a screen positive on MPS 2, but we'll continue that through at least through next summer. So.
Yeah, I know that Kate gave a presentation during the APHL meeting, but Melissa, if you don't mind, do you just remind us like how many babies you plan to screen? And it sounds like you guys are doing some sequencing as a second tier, and then it sounds like GAGs as second tier as well.
Correct. So our plan is to screen 140,000 babies. That's of course based on what the birth rate looks like in North Carolina. So like I said, we'll go through at least next summer on that. And yes, as soon as we get a screen positive baby in our lab, we assess how much specimen is available and send out some spots to PerkinElmer. So PerkinElmer does both the dried blood spot gags, and Kristen can probably weigh in. That turnaround time is about 3 or 4 days, I want to say. And then they also do the sequencing for us, which takes a few extra days. But we refer right away to UNC, and Kristen is our genetic counselor, so she's the one who's talking to families. Sorry, I should also say when they come in, Duke is our partner for confirmatory testing. So the UNC team gets the samples of urine and some blood and sends them over to Duke for the confirmatory tests.
So, and then just one question for the 5 screen positives. So are you guys referring them to UNC before they, so have any of those been referred out, the ones that had where you got the DBS gags and the sequencing results, or UNC doesn't have contact with them?
We refer right away, but yes, they are hoping to get the dried blood spot gags back within 5 days, which for the most part has happened. So again, Kristen can weigh in. I think for the most part, we've had those back before she's made contact with the families, but our SOP is that the UNC calls the family within 5 days. So if we didn't have the dried blood spot gags, we'd still call them. But I think for the most part, we've had them back.
That's yeah. The dried blood spots have been coming back in about 3 days.
Oh, that's good. I'm guessing that makes your conversations easier, Kristen. I was wondering if you had any lessons learned. I know MPS 1 was a great learning experience for the MPS.
As you probably easily remember, Jennifer.
Well, Kristen did the hard part.
It is helpful to have some of that information, whether it's kind of to, just even for a little bit, relieve some of that stress for families, to assure them, hey, this is looking to be more like a pseudodeficiency, versus a true positive case. But yeah, having that information is helpful. It also helps the clinical team as well know, if we were to get a dry blood spot that came back positive, obviously we would want to, we're still going to act within our time frame, but it would give us some more information and guidance there. But it does help with the counseling for families.
So if it does have pseudo, I'm assuming, and you can just let us know, Kristen, is it just counseling if it's pseudo deficiencies, or do they actually get patients? Are you planning to get patients in to see them as well for evaluation?
So we're going to see, so even though we'll have some of those results before the visit, We're still gonna see them all, once that first year is abnormal. So we'll still do confirmatory urine gags and, enzyme,
Enzyme.
that's going to Duke that Melissa mentioned. So they're all still coming in, at least with the pilot study. They're all still coming in, for counseling, and the confirmatory labs. And then, you know, assuming, as with all, our babies so far, our 5th baby still kind of pending on the confirmatory labs, but, assuming that all confirmatory labs come back, normal, not suggestive of MPS II, looking to be most consistent with pseudodeficiency, we're not recommending, any follow-up for them clinically, unless any concerns arise with the family.
Amy, you had another question?
Melissa, thanks for the update on DMD and just looking at your July numbers versus the ones you just ran through. Do you have an idea of, are you still at about 9 carriers? And then it looks like most of the people that, or families that screen positive consent to next generation sequencing, and that seems pretty consistent from July to now. I don't remember if you guys, are you still doing latent total CK, or is that still part of your protocol?
We are. So I didn't cover that part in the slides, and we update our slides at the beginning of every month. So I'm hoping these are the accurate numbers given today is December 1st. We do the latent CK. So 62 parents have consented to that, and 50 are in the normal range. There's 2 with slightly elevated, 10 haven't been resulted yet, it looks like. And let's see. I'm not sure what 2 results pending means. I don't know if Lisa wants to weigh in there.
That's helpful. And you said, so in July, 2 positives, DMD and CLCN1. Is that still what you mean by 2 DMD?
We had 2 DMD pathological variants and 1 CLCN1 pathological variant.
So you have 3 kind of positives, or?
Yes. Well, right.
Gotcha. Thank you. Just trying to walk through between the 2
Mhm.
numbers. That's really
Yep.
helpful. How long is this study gonna go for?
Until next year, I think we're gonna screen again. Lisa, jump in here through next fall. I think we've got funding through next December, is my recollection. I'm really speaking on behalf of Holly PA, I should say, who's the PI of that project.
This is Lisa. We know that the follow-up will extend through next year, but we anticipate stopping screening partially through 2023.
Okay, thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Any other updates on your next phase of early check?
Yes, we've been in the planning stages, as you guys might know, to do a pretty big transition to sequencing. So hopefully we'll have some news to share there soon.
We look forward to it. Any other questions from the audience? I know we've been asking a lot from the MBSTN side of things. Feel free to unmute, raise your hand, use the chat feature. A lot of good information here.
Jennifer and all, this is Bob Vogt at CDC. Going back to the MPS II, am I correct in gathering the information here is that 0 of 5 first screen positives have been confirmed, so the positive predictive value is 0 so far? And did I get that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and when what I'm really wondering about, given that that's correct, how do the genetic counselors feel and their patients when they go to counseling? How do they feel about this term pseudodeficiency? It seems like a hard thing to explain to new parents or that sort of thing.
I'm happy to answer that question.
I was like, I'm gonna punt that right over to you, Kristen.
I'm Kristen. I'm one of the pediatric genetic counselors. So I've been a part of the North Carolina pilot studies when we started with MPS 1 as well. So it is, you're absolutely right. It is a challenging thing to counsel families on. It's very confusing to families. It's very confusing to even pediatricians when you're trying to explain that to them. The main thing that we really try to relay to families is that this, I mean, the term pseudo deficiency and like a false deficiency, it's kind of a, the term itself is not the best, but you're right, it really does make the counseling challenging, but we really try to reassure the families that we have seen these types of things before. We're recognizing that this is occurring more often than we thought before, especially with newborn screening, and that individuals with the pseudodeficiencies have not had any evidence of GAG storage. And it's something that we talked with Dr. Munzer with a lot, and he truly feels that, for truly to have MPS 2, you really have to have that evidence of the storage of urinary GAGs. So we really try to reassure them that this is something that is more common than we typically thought before, and we're just finding it out more as we're doing newborn screening, and a lot still left to learn. But all the babies have had normal GAG levels on dry blood spot and within the urine, and so that for us is enough to say not consistent with MPS 2. So we really try to weigh heavily on all those labs.
Thank you. That's very informative. And one last little follow-up. Are pseudodeficiencies heritable?
I'm sorry, it was kind of cutting out. What was the last part?
Are pseudodeficiencies heritable traits? Is it possible?
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
sorry. Yes, they are. So
Yeah, it's a variant in the gene that
right,
causes pseudodeficiency.
okay.
So yes.
So the families then are I guess counseled to the extent that this may happen in future births or whatever.
Yeah, so that's something we'll talk with them about if they have other children, that it's possible their other child could also screen positive as well. You're absolutely right there. We haven't been offering family parents testing for the pseudodeficiency variants. It's not something that's covered under the pilot, and so that would be like an additional cost for family members. But yes, that is something that we would talk with families about. But as far as determining, with our 5 screen positives, we haven't been offering testing for parents.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Friedenberg, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sorry, I'm on my cell. I've been
It's okay. Mhm.
So my question is on your pseudodeficiencies, well, we always reassure patients that that's unlikely to have any clinical significance. Is there any long-term follow-up plan with these families, or once you've cleared them, that's it?
Go ahead.
What I was thinking about their understanding, I mean, even though we all know genetic counseling is incredibly thorough and often explores their perceptions of what we're telling them, I just wonder if somehow or other later on these families still think there might be some risk to these kids.
I mean, I don't know, Kristen, if you guys on the clinical side, I know you mentioned, you've kind of given them quote unquote the clean bill of health at that point once the confirmatory tests come in. But, I will say from a pilot study and ICHD funding perspective, our scope of work pretty much ends, unfortunately, at confirmatory testing. So we don't have funding to do any kind of long-term follow-up. Not that that's not important, but that would definitely be something that would have to happen, kind of clinically outside the scope of the project, unfortunately.
Yeah, with our MPS 1 pilot, we actually offered a follow-up for families. I can't remember if it was like a 6-month follow-up or a 12-month follow-up, not sure, but we did actually offer that to families, all families that had a pseudodeficiency. Not a single one of them was wanting to come back to see us. They felt pretty good with the information. All the families so far with the MPS 2 pilot, when we've discussed the results and pseudodeficiency variant with them. None of them seemed, I mean, they were very relieved that this wasn't MPS 2. So the concern for pseudo and any follow-up or concern really hasn't been raised at this point.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for this information. It's interesting. It's a little, I mean, 0 for 5 is kind of stark, but I'm wondering what method are you all using for the analytical method?
Well, that's really Kate's area of expertise. She's our lab director. She, I can say we're, using the QSights and PerkinElmer's lab developed assay.
Yeah.
And our cutoff is 10% of the daily median. And I think we've been hovering either in the high 6s or kind of low to mid 7s so far of the 5 screen positive. So if that gives you guys a little bit more information around, kind of potential cutoffs.
Okay, well, that's very good information. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, the MPS one, the MPS one pilot was a really great learning experience for the MPS 2 pilot.
We benefited. Thank you.
I know that it was, a lot of the community members weren't following. This was one of the pilots where we did do some follow-up on the pseudo deficiencies, which was good. I mean, none of them had any, evidence of disease, but at least the good thing about the pilots is that did build the evidence that these pseudo deficiencies, or at least start building the evidence that initially they did not have any symptoms of the disease. So it's an interesting question that Dr. Friedenberg asked about doing some other follow-up if, families would be willing to participate in that to make sure that there was any symptoms.
Jennifer, you're right. The learnings from the MPS 1 pilot have been really, really informative for us. And we look back on that time frequently when we're working on this current project.
Yes, it's good to hear that. It's very interesting to hear what you guys are doing with that and applying it. So I'm glad. Yes. Any other comments about this?
I will just say one other thing. I don't know if anybody from the North Carolina newborn screening program is on, and I don't ever want to speak on behalf of them, but just related to the conversation, they are in the kind of final planning stages for MPS 1 in Pompeii for statewide screening. So we do work with them on a different CDC funded project on that, but yeah. So FYI, that's coming soon to North Carolina as well.
Oh, that's good to know as well. That's good to know. Yeah. So no surprise positives in your first couple of weeks with this one.
We did have the first screen positive baby, right? Lisa was like, I don't know, 2 weeks in.
Yeah, but it wasn't for the MPS 1 pilot, the true positive.
Right.
The one true positive was shortly after we started.
So we were on our
Shortly
toes.
I should clarify, shortly after Jennifer started the laboratory screening.
If there's no other questions, I'll move on to the Georgia group. Dr. Friedenberg, I know you have your hand up, but I'm guessing that was for your last question. I guess she still has her hand up. Okay, I know Angela is on the call and she gave me a little bit of update, but if you want to add any more information, Angela, go ahead. Or Dr. Wilcox is on the call too.
Well, fortunately, things are pretty quiet these days. Fortunately, unfortunately. Krabbe, we've only had the one positive diagnosed the case. That was, and we talked about that in the past, I believe, and it's been a great asset.
And that one was I know you were working up during the last
were we
call.
working up? Yeah, it was.
So it is a positive or no?
Yeah,
it is a
yeah,
positive.
Yeah, it was an infantile case and they elected not to do a transplant or any treatment. We use cycosine as a second tier test before reporting out. So we don't do molecular second tier testing.
And I don't know how long after you guys started this pilot did you guys have this case?
It's almost a year.
Okay.
We started September last year screening.
So, and you guys, your birth rate is around like 100.
120
Okay.
to 130, depending on the year.
All right, sorry for the
No,
interruption.
you're good. You're good. But yeah, it's been a good assay. Especially, you know, doing the second tier of Psychosine at Mayo, it's been great. We're still, you know, in the rework and bring back up homocystinuria pilot, the expanded homocystinuria. So hopefully we'll have more news in the near future. And then
And
just
our-
also
our
oh,
lab's
good.
our lab's getting renovated, which is wonderful. And Bonnie's on the call too. And there's a proposal going into the legislature for MPS 2 that would start after the renovations are done sometime next year, I guess.
That's great. Congratulations to the Georgia Lab on Bonnie coming in, by the way. We're everyone in Georgia is very happy to see her in our state now. And I know that you had a visit from someone from our branch, Francis Lee, I think, was over, I think this week, to visit with you all. So
Yes, Francis and Suzanne Cordovado were here.
Oh, you got the red carpet treatment or whatever.
Ah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we're trying to straighten some things out.
Yeah, well, that's an endless task, I know. So again, welcome to Georgia. I just one curiosity question of those of you all, Bill and all, that have looked at this. Do you think that the use of the Psychosine follow-up test improves the basis, the philosophy for screening, including Krabbe and newborn screening?
I'll tell you, I do. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, from a clinician's point of view, yes, we're not dealing with all these, we don't know what's going to happen to you cases.
Yeah, we sent
we-
about 40 over to Mayo, around 40, 42 with one true positive. So those would have all been false positives.
Yeah. So
Okay,
great.
that's good information to know too. So thank you for that, Bonnie.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it wasn't so much. I mean, the information, of course, is hugely valuable, but the expression, the response to my question was, you know, a couple decibels higher than anything else I've heard.
Yeah, I went from being, you know, before we had Psychosine as a second tier test, being pretty adamantly opposed to doing this based on New York's experience to you know, now I think it's fine. This is easier than many things that we deal with, and MPS 1 was a problem until we had second tier testing for that, and that's gotten rid of the pseudodeficiency problem that was significant in the pilot study.
And your I guess the turnaround time, I might have asked this before, Dr. Wilcox, but I'm guessing the turnaround time for the Psychosine test does not impact when you're reporting these out or when you need to follow these folks.
Yeah, not much. I mean, Bonnie can address how much time it takes to get it done, but it's fairly quick. And we have to send it to Mayo because we don't do it in-house.
Yeah, it adds about 5 days to the turnaround because it's not a DNA test. It's, you know, it's an enzymatic, so or a mass spec test, so it's a little easier than the DNA test. It doesn't take quite as long.
So this is Debbie Friedenberg, and I just had a question. Are your clinicians on board with doing Krabbe's? We were a little bit surprised, and I'm not generalizing it. We kind of surveyed them and we got some pretty negative responses, which really surprised me. And I didn't know if it was just a couple of folks, you know, in our state, or whether you've gotten any feedback from your clinicians about the Krabbe's screening.
Um,
Do you mean our geneticists?
Yes.
Well, Bill's one of them.
I'm one of the senior ones, so you know, I'll speak on behalf of them. No, not really. I think we've all been very happy with the way this is running. We had, you know, it all involves all hands on deck when we get a positive infantile one with our colleagues in transplant, but yeah, I think as things go, this is working very well. We haven't had any concerns or complaints at all.
But they would only come to you also, right? Would they go to any other sites?
No,
At the
not,
state?
Not in
not
Georgia.
yet. Yeah,
Okay,
I mean, the transplants would be done at CHOA, so there is now a geneticist in Augusta. He's just getting started, so I don't know if he's going to take these cases or not, but the transplants would have to be done at CHOA.
Yeah, and our survey was hypothetical. Obviously, we're not doing it, but I was a little bit surprised about the negativity that came back from some metabolic geneticists on newborn screening for Krabbe's, and I was just sounds like it's our experiences unique.
I think it's legitimate if you're looking at, doing molecular testing and the experience in New York. I think if we had to live by that model, we'd all be killing ourselves. So the Cycosine is really a game changer for doing the second tier test. That's really helped.
Right, and they were provided information about Cycosine second tier, but
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
it may be just, a couple of folks in our area.
Well,
And
I
we
mean,
may
there's
just-
also
might help.
there's
Oh, go
also
ahead.
concern about the efficacy of transplantation, even if done very quickly. That there's debate about that, about how well that works and what you're going to have at the end of the day in terms of function.
Right.
And I think it helps too, where, we kind of have a centralized genetic service in Georgia. We have a center of excellence for the LSDs on the whole, and that team in conjunction with Bill and our other physicians, they are really familiar with these disorders and really sort of embrace adding on these things, which has been great. And they've really partnered with the newborn screening system as we consider new diseases. So it's never just sort of a hand down from the state DPH to Emory saying, here, take care of these kids. We all work together along the way.
This is Bob. I'm trying to remember. I think I heard that Krabbe was going to be revisited or renominated for RUSP consideration. I may be wrong about that. Does you all know the status of that?
It's up for a vote in February.
Yep, it's currently under review.
Currently under review. So at the next meeting, is that going to be discussed and voted on?
Yes,
So
that's my understanding.
Okay. well,
Yeah,
then this is-
Bob, there have already been 2 evidence reviews presented on Krabbe's, and in the next meeting is, I think, the final part of that, with it's scheduled for a vote, to my knowledge.
And I think so this is Cindy Powell, I'm on my phone. So I think, the Virginia group had published that paper saying that, the clinicians were not in favor of newborn screening for Krabbe because of the turnaround time. When you don't have a transplant center in your state and you're trying to, get a child identified and, approved for out-of-state treatment within a 30-day deadline for infantile Krabbe, that they just felt that it was something they, would be very difficult to do. So I think it is dependent on what the state resources are.
yeah, I think that some of the advocacy groups too, Dr. Powell, were working. I went to a Krabbe advocacy group meeting, and I think they were looking at publishing a paper in response to that Virginia paper too. So maybe I'll try to connect with them to see if we can get an update to see where that stands as well, because I know that the Virginia paper had specific points why that Krabbe screening was, not appropriate for their state. And I think they were working on something to address that as well. I'm not sure if that was added into the evidence reviews. But I know Dr. Brower, you had your hand up for a while. You want to chime in?
Yeah, sorry, just to take us back, I just wanted, Georgia, if you guys could remind us, so you're not using New York's approach to screening, but what are you using, like, for the first tier, and How does it differ from what New York's doing?
Bonnie, if you feel like commenting more on the essay, you know more than me, but I'm happy to
You're
chime in.
talking about the Krabbe, right?
Yeah, Krebs
Yeah.
Bay. Sorry, Bonnie.
Okay,
Thank you.
well, we, when we validated our LSD panel, it was, we also, we validated them all. We're simply ignoring the ones that are not on our menu. So we are using the Neo LSD kit with PerkinElmer mass spec. And then we have, before I got here, Dr. Hall had set up an algorithm for Clear. And so it gets run through Clear. And then once there's a relative risk determined for that, basically there were 40 that were potential candidates, they got sent off for cycosine. So that's basically what we're doing. I believe, yeah, I believe it's repeated. And then once we have the repeat specimen, no, it's not repeated. Sorry, I'm thinking about the NeoBase. Different approach here.
So you, and just for a little bit of clarification, so I'm assuming you guys are doing the NeoBase with multiple LSD enzymes, correct?
It's the Neo LSD. Yeah, we're doing Neo LSD on
With all 6?
Yes, but we
Okay.
only analyze and review the ones that are on our panel, which is the MPS 1, Pompeii, and now Krabbe.
Gotcha.
So if others are added, we'll have a relatively simple turnaround time to make sure that those are verified and get our background information on the population.
But are the other ones in the kit used in the Clear tool? Do you know, Bonnie?
No, we're not reviewing them in the Clear tool. We are only reviewing those that we are reporting.
Gotcha. And Dr. Kajani, you had a question as well?
No, I don't have a question. I have a comment. For Krabbe disease now, I would say that we follow basically the same protocol. I just want to reiterate that when we started Krabbe screening, no one knew cycosine was in blood spots. And so Joe Orsini from our lab was the one who actually realized you could detect it. And because of that, and with Dieter Matern at Mayo Clinic, we were able to improve the assay so that it sets basically the standard that all the states are using now. And so we follow the same thing. We do our enzyme analysis. We use Clear. We send it for cycosine. While it's out for cycosine, we do the DNA and then we report out after that. So we're able to parse out now quite well, as everybody sort of knows, the infantile cases from the kids that might be, have the later onset. And Joe has worked quite a bit with Mayo to make sure that the results and everything that people are using now is consistent.
Thanks for that reminder, Michelle. Do you think, is that part of the review of the advisory committee? They're sort of looking at new approaches to screening.
Yeah, that was included in what I had presented to the committee before I stepped down. I think it's online now. You can access the evidence, the evidence review that the nomination and prioritization committee did.
Yeah, and then the nomination that was prepared, it was, Joe worked on it, Joanne Kurtzberg, Dieter, Hunter's Hope, the folks in Buffalo, there were, I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out, so I apologize. But anyway, it was a group like that. And really, I think Dieter had talked at some point about it as well in a different venue. Basically cycosine was sort of a game changer for newborn screening, and being able to identify these kids at high risk for infantile quickly is basically key, I think, to changing a lot of people's minds about screening for Krabbe when you compare it back to where we were, 10 years ago or whatever.
Wow, that's really important work. Thank you, guys.
Michelle, I had just a couple follow-up questions because I just wanted to make sure that there's a couple distinctions between the Georgia protocol that I wanted to just make sure I captured. So are you guys using Neobase, the Neobase LSD kit, or are you guys doing your own kit?
We're using the Neobase 2 now, LSD.
Okay, Neobase 2 LSD or whatever you call it. And then you said that you're using the Clear tool, and then at the same time you're doing the DNA. Is that correct? Or does the DNA happen when you guys are sending it out for second tier cyclazine?
We give a heads up to DNA that there's a potential, and then it gets run through Clear. When the results come out of that, Joe will make, he'll look at the data and make a call, send it off to Dieter for cyclazine, and then we will begin the DNA so that we have all the data back when we make the referral.
Gotcha. Okay.
And we do report out the molecular, but yeah, we rely heavily on the cyclazine.
Okay. But if it's
Michelle?
like a pseudo,
Michelle, this is Debbie Friedenberg. So if your Clear analysis doesn't suggest that there's a significant risk, you don't move forward after that?
Joe's probably a better one to answer that because he looks at the data every day, but he relies on Clear. It's like a constellation of things because we look at, he looks at the 3-plex and the 6-plex data. He runs it through Clear. And then he's got a pretty good sense at that point if it's going to be truly a false positive or not. So there is some subjectivity in what Joe does on a daily basis, and I don't see that part of it. But yeah, I can ask him for a clearer distinction.
yeah, maybe we can get him on the call and kind of like talk about that process a little bit, which would be interesting.
Yeah, and it's evolving. We've evolved over time on how we manage Krabbe. I will say since we started doing Clear, definitely the number of false positives that even would go to cyclazine is reduced. We look at he does an adjustment, so he runs the 6-plex and then does like a correction factor because if GALC activity is low, GALC is sort of the lousiest enzyme in that group so far as activity is concerned. And so if the GALC is low, but all of the other enzymes are also low, he calculates a correction factor. If all the other enzymes are very high and GALC is low, then he's got more confidence in the fact that this is going to be a true one. And he kind of assesses it that way. Then he runs it through, he looks at the actual enzyme data and then he puts it through Clear and then makes the call on the next steps.
One other question I think that might be interested, and maybe, I don't know if you can answer this, Michelle, or maybe Joe can address it later on, is does he ever go back and run that information back into Clear and if the results change?
And so I guess the deadline for the submission would be.
I don't know what you mean.
Like after he has, like, so because Clear is a database that people are uploading cases while people are actually using it to analyze it. I'm wondering if your cases, like for their interpretation from Clear, does it ever change? And I know that they have two, like I'm guessing he has two different tools, like in Clear where they use, I forget what the one is called, but then one is specific for the LSDs. And I'm wondering if he goes ever, have you guys ever gone back and has the interpretation from Clear ever changed?
I don't think we've gone back. I don't know that there's, a gazillion cases being added that would sort of change that. Especially for Krabbe, since it seems to be quite a rare disease. But I'm pretty sure he hasn't gone back. Once, we make the referral and we get the workup, it's, if you run it back through now, you may get a different answer, I guess, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't, but I can double check. I'll make a note to ask him.
Because I know for Pompe, some of the stuff has changed with the new cases changing from pseudodeficiencies and stuff. So I asked.
Yeah, I mean, we, for the more common pseudodeficiency, we have the DNA too, so.
True. Any other questions? Oh, go ahead, Bob.
One final maybe question for Michelle. Could you estimate at this point, with the, the better differentiation of false positives and all, what is the estimate of birth prevalence of Krabbe in New York?
It really hasn't changed. It's like 1 in 250, something along those lines. Joe is working on gathering. I know he's gathered a lot of our data and sort of went through it for the expert review for the advisory committee. We've, at the end of the day, what this has gained is exactly what Bill said, is that your referral rate is way lower than it was. And so your hit rate has improved, but the overall frequency in New York at least has remained pretty unchanged.
Oh, good. Thank you. That's reassuring to know. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm going to, since we have 10 minutes left on this call, I'm going to move along to Brigham's Limited Health, the DMD pilot. And I know Dr. Prada was on, and I'm seeing if he's still on, that can give us an update.
Yes, I'm here. We continue to screen. We've screened 8,139 babies to date. We've had 208 CKs above cutoff that have gone to sequencing. Again, they all go to sequencing because we sort of get dual consent at the beginning. We still do not have a true positive. We last week we thought we did. We had a male with a VUS, which was a missense variant that was not reported in any of the databases, but in the Leiden database, there had been at the very same locus a different nucleotide substitution that in 2 patients that was considered or reported as causing DMD. So we did recall the patient into our follow-up clinic, and the repeat CK was relatively low. So we think that that VUS is probably a benign variant, but the family went through counseling and they are going to be followed a little more. So today we have no true positives. We have that 1 male, and then we have 5 female carriers, 2 duplications, 2 deletions, and 1 VUS. And we have 1 male who had an elevated CK, normal DMD sequence, but then a repeat CK that was elevated. So that male is still undergoing evaluation. And that's where we are at the moment. I do have a little bit more follow-up on Dr. Friedenberg's question from many months ago on any information we might have on influences on CK values. And I think we are preparing to submit something for publication. We did find that 5-minute APGARs below 6 were associated with significantly higher CK levels, and that delivery by forceps or vacuum also were associated with significantly higher CK levels. And the last piece of the puzzle we're trying to scrape together is to look at duration of labor in association with CK level, and also cesarean sections performed for failure to progress, to sort of round out the numbers. So hopefully we'll have some helpful descriptive information on these 8,000 babies that can help us a little bit with our counseling on the level of risk with an initial CK elevation. And that's about all I have for right now.
That's a very good, that would be a very interesting paper to read. And I would be interested to hear your opinion on this. I'm going to ask, I guess, a really vague question. what do you think of, and I know other people are on this call are have done or are doing DMD pilots, but you know, what is your thoughts on using CK or CKMM for a DMD newborn screening pilot? Like, is this a good analyte, or should we be looking for something else?
I think it's a good analyte. I mean, we, again, maybe someday we'll get to primary DNA and we won't need it, but I think even these tweaks that that our information may help with, I think are not, I don't think we would go in and alter the cutoffs based on this information. And I mean, if we went with the New York cutoffs, which are higher than ours, I think CK performed, you know, CKMM, the PerkinElmer assay performed pretty well with a relatively, you know, few patients recalled. So I'm not sure what other analytes we would use that has an assay that is as available as, you know, the current technologies that are being used for the CKMM. But I think short of primary DNA screening, I'm still okay with the CKMM. I don't feel, and these elevations in the immediate newborn period from, you know, just the trauma of being delivered, they're not huge elevations. We're talking about, you know, in the high hundreds to 1,000 to low thousands. Most of them are still below that 2,000 cutoff level that the New York program, you know, recently reported on.
Thank you.
May I add to this that this is a very good discussion on DMD, and you all may well know this already, but there's going to be a special issue of IJNS devoted to DMD newborn screening, and the deadline originally was yesterday, but yesterday's gone, as they say. So they actually had moved it forward up to I believe the end of January. I think January 30th and 31st is the new deadline. So papers for that issue are being, I think they would be happy to receive additional papers for that issue.
Great. Well, that's great. That's good information for me, because we have a draft of a manuscript, and I guess we'll try to move that along a little faster.
Yeah, very timely information.
Yeah, I think that'll be you know, we've got the little QC thing that we're going to slip into this, or at least submit it and see what happens. But I think it's the timing is just about right for an issue devoted to this in newborn screening, and largely, well, what you all have done. And Richard, your stuff is terrific. Let me ask Richard one other question. I think I'm correct. Well, from my recollections, the reference ranges that are used in most of the pilot studies that are general population pilot studies, so they include both little boy babies and little girl babies, and there's not a separate reference range for males and females, but I believe in your study there is. Do you all have separate reference ranges based on
Right.
sex? Can you comment on that?
We do, because that's what PerkinElmer supplied to us. They did not supply a single kind of joint cutoff. They supplied male and female. So we started off our pilot with that. So we use a different cutoff for boys and girls. And I don't think New York did that. I'm not quite sure what was done to modify what PerkinElmer supplied. But I mean, as we accumulate more babies on that assay and the large number that New York has, maybe those cutoffs should be unified. I'm not sure that the male female really, it just makes more work for us. I'd rather have one cutoff, but we stuck to what the the lab supplied.
Thank you, Richard. I believe we've been working closely with the New York folks to generate the data on these QC things, and so we hear about what they're doing. And Norma at one point gave us information. I think even sent a copy of the original pamphlet or that accompanied the kit, the instructions for the use of the kit that did have this reference range information in it. The newer version of the kit, I believe, does not have that. So if I'm correct in that, I think that's what we found when we went back and looked at the kits we've been getting. That information about, or that suggestion for the beginning for establishing reference ranges, guidance for establishing reference ranges, I think is not in the current newer kits.
Thank you for that information. I'll go back to them and ask them if they've changed things. So we may change things as well. I think one cutoff is probably, it's not that big a difference between the male and female, and it's also, you know, again, it's quite a bit lower than the 2000 that and I think one is 900 and one's 1,000 or 1,100 for male and female. They're not so different, but it'd be interesting to do you know, to look at their most recent data now that they've been doing. They have some larger cohorts to report on.
No, very good. Well, thank you.
So I know we have to go to some announcements. Michelle, do you have a quick comment or?
Yeah, I just want to say that Norma gave a presentation at APHL, so it's probably available. We observed about a 6% higher CKMM value in males when we compared to females. And we saw that the variation, that the levels were most impacted by the age of the baby when the sample was collected. And so we went with those cutoffs and didn't take into account gender. And plus, on a newborn screening perspective, we don't always know that the gender is what's on the card. So you know, we could have a male baby checked off female, vice versa, and all that. So we went with the age at collection.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I will go ahead and speed through the some few announcements with the help of my team. If you guys haven't heard already, HRSA does have announced 2 new funding opportunities. The State Newborn Screening Priorities Program, or PROPEL, and the National Center for Newborn Screening System Excellence, NBS Excel. There's going to be 2 webinars in this month about the 2 programs. The focus groups, one of the focus groups for the PROPEL does include short-term and long-term follow-up. So I wanted to highlight one of the programs at ACMG, which is long-term follow-up cares and long-term follow-up checks program that does offer some tools for long-term follow-up. And I will check in to see if anyone on my team wants to add any additional information, if Dr. Brower or Dr. Chan want to add any more comments about that.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. I think we just want to say, as you guys are thinking about applying for the state funding, we'd be happy to help you out with some of the long-term follow-up question and answer sets, as well as a tool to collect longitudinal data. So we'd love to have you reach out as you're thinking about those funding opportunities.
And Dr. Chan, are you still on the line?
I'm still here.
Do you want to do your announcements really quickly for the podcast?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. All right. Let's see. Hi, everyone. So we're happy to announce that we have our latest episode with Sylvia Mann, who is a genetic counselor and also the supervisor of the genetics section of the state of Hawaii Department of Health. She shares her journey into genetic counseling and how she plays a role in newborn screening. And in her episode, she also talks about diversity, equity, inclusion. And I know DEI was a topic of interest, I think, in our last pilot call last month. So definitely check out her episode. Next slide. And we're also excited that we have MBS Strand is part of the Harvey Levy's Newborn Screening Symposium, which is hosted by Harvard next week, December 8th, Thursday from 8:15 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. It is a free symposium, and it will be focused on the past, present, and future of newborn screening. So definitely please attend. And
We have several folks on this call that will be in this meeting that are
yeah,
presenting.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. I want to also highlight that a lot of our members are also part of this a fantastic lineup of speakers. And definitely follow us on social media.
Thanks again, everybody. Our next call will be the beginning of next year, January 5th, which is the first Thursday of each month at 2 p.m. Eastern. If you have any feedback or if you have any questions, please contact myself or Dr. Amy Brower, and then you can also rewatch or send this meeting to your colleagues by going to our website or going to our YouTube channel. So thanks again, everybody, and I will see you next month. I hope everybody has good holidays, had a great Thanksgiving, and hope you have a Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks again.